safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, October 7th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, on the anniversary of October 7th, Ilan Pappe, renowned Israeli historian, author of many books, including his latest, Lobbying for Zionism on Both Sides of the Atlantic, joined Sam and I on Friday for a conversation that you'll hear soon. And later in the show, Rakan Abed El Rahman, correspondent in the Gaza Strip for the National News, joins us to talk about the conditions on the ground. Also on the program today is the deadline to register to vote in Texas, where there is a really important Senate race. Go do it. Israel bombs another school and mosque in Gaza, issues new evacuation orders in the north and the south, Khan Yunis, for what they call a new phase in this never-ending slaughter. And they're also heavily bombing South Lebanon and near Beirut in its so-called limited operation. But the ground invasion suddenly needs troops from a third IDF division. It's not getting reported much, but they are not doing so well on the ground in the south, the IDF. Israeli officials tell Drop Site that Blinken gave them the go-ahead to bomb aid trucks going into Gaza back in October. Netanyahu rages after Macron says that bomb shipments that could be used in Gaza should be halted. Number 13 also says Georgia voting deadline today, too. There you go. Good to know. Harris meets with Arab and Muslim leaders in Michigan, but not uncommitted. A very surface-level appearance. Obama starts campaigning for Harris next week, or this week, I should say. The new Supreme Court term starts today, and they are hearing cases on gun control, trans care, the death penalty, and Texas's ban on emergency abortions. Biden will allow temporary legal status for migrants from Haiti, Venezuela, and more to lapse. And stay safe with Hurricane Milton, folks. Upgraded to a Category 4. After the devastation for Hurricane Helene still remains. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Alex from Twinsburg writes in, Ohio registration deadline 2, really important Senate race here as well. Whoa, hello guys. Hello Bradley, hello Matt. Obviously, Texas Love says, wait, I am in the first half, LOL. Yes, you can. You can, but Sam likes to discourage it because then there's a backlog. But, you know, I'm a more efficient reader than him, so I can handle all of this coming at me. So keep it going. They won't get read until the the fun half, most likely. But we actually have a pretty long first hour of the show today. Obviously, it's the anniversary of October 7th and the ongoing genocide in Gaza that has rage for over a year with no end in sight at this point. In the aftermath, you know, we had some really intense conversations, I remember, on this program, and we knew that there was going to be immense slaughter and bloodshed in the Gaza Strip. I'm not sure if I could go back in time and tell myself how horrible it would be that I would have believed myself. But I don't know. I mean, there's a letter that's being circulated from 99 U.S. doctors and nurses that says that at minimum the death toll is 118,908, 5.4% of Gaza's population. we're still using the 40,000 death toll here in this country, and that is not the case.
Yeah, it's false. David Klyan, a writer, I think we might have had him on this program before, but I remember retweeting this on October 7th. He said, the current Israeli government is overtly genocidal and routinely kills Palestinian civilians as a matter of policy. It's about to kill many more. There's no excuse for not knowing this. To rally behind them now is a statement of geopolitical preference, not moral principle. And as far as things stated at 9:36 a.m. on October 7th, right on the money.
Also, Wet Blanket writes, in Arizona registration deadline today as well. So lots of deadlines. Just check if you're not registered yet. Check to see if you're registered to vote, because in a lot of the most important swing states, the deadline is today, or states with really important Senate races, as it relates to Texas. We'll start with a Israel-Palestine related story, just to get this out of the way. So Elon Musk decided to show up at the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Here's his dramatic entrance. And I say dramatic not in a positive sense. I say dramatic in the sense of like, oh my goodness, can you believe a human being behaves in this manner? Cringe warning. I
was going to say, this is the part of drama, the genre of drama known as cringe.
Yes. Yeah. Let's, for the podcast audience, just be grateful that you're listening on audio only, and you don't have to see this man romping around stage. Here we go.
His name is Elon Musk. He saved free speech. He created...
Came here illegally.
So many different great things. Where is he? Come on up here, Elon. He created the first major American car company in generations, and his rocket company is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space.
Because we privatized.
Privatized.
Take over, Elon.
Right.
Yes, take over.
Here he is.
Hi, everyone.
Dark MAGA hats. Oh!
No swag.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA.
What a
First
nerd.
of all,
I mean, honestly, this is the kind of stuff that would have appealed to me when I was 11 years old. Like,
somebody confident would be just like, yeah, the impression's going to be made by the colors themselves.
Right.
I don't need to state it just explicitly that I'm actually dark MAGA.
Do you see the hat? I'm bringing the Green Day aesthetic to, this is a little Gorka. Green Bay aesthetic to the MAGA movement. We have a still image of this alpha male. Jesus Christ. People have done some good job photoshopping him, falling or doing a dance move in this regard.
I mean, you
Look
wonder...
at the contempt on Trump's face.
You wonder why young men are so lost, is that this is one of the supposedly the male role models of our time, is that guy.
Although, I mean, he has more money than God. Here he is, the right-hand man to a decaying king in a fantasy novel.
Your point is well taken, my liege.
Yes. Have you considered killing your brother to cement your legacy on the throne?
Fratricide, my liege.
Ooh.
None of the stuff that he gets credit for is actually him. Like SpaceX, that's all just privatized NASA. The actual way that this guy got his money is like a bunch of other folks. PayPal, they won a big bet on. Guess what? People are going to have to send money over the internet. I wonder why. I wonder who could have predicted that would be a thing. Like international trade and telegraph was a big thing of sending money over telegraph lines. Of course, sending money over the internet was going to be a thing. That was their great invention. All these guys, Peter Omadayar, all the he was probably the best one in terms of what he's done with his money. But all these creeps that now push crypto and tech or whatever, there's nothing actually. There's no even Edison, let's try out all the filaments to do the light bulb. These guys did nothing but make a bet.
I mean, Trump is a caricature of a rich guy and is definitely not as rich as Elon Musk. But at least he's like, there's something physical here as opposed to just being some edgelord on the internet.
Yeah.
He resents the fact that he even needs to come to Big Daddy rich guy to help him out here, and that he gets to take center stage. But
yeah, Trump's actually used undocumented labor to put up skyscrapers. These guys are just, I mean, use Russell Brand language, money changers.
Right.
Basically.
But here's part of Elon's speech. You know, when he took over Twitter, he said he bought it because he wanted it to be free of political bias. Anyway, here he is talking at a Trump rally.
So I have one ask for everyone in the audience, everyone who watches this video, everyone in the live stream. There's one request. It's very important. Register to vote. Okay? And get everyone you know and everyone you don't know, drag them
My God.
to register to vote. There's only 2 days left to register to vote in Georgia and Arizona. 48 hours. Like, text people now. Now.
Just no charisma.
Oh, and then make sure they actually do vote.
Yeah, we get it.
If they don't, this will be the last election. That's my prediction.
Nothing's more encourage people.
Nothing's more important. So get everyone you know. Everyone. So I'm speaking to people out there. Everyone in the crowd, I think, is.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So
I mean, just imagine him telling a bunch of like engineers who actually know physics and like sort of material science 100 times better than his charlatan ass. Like, what we need to do is have a steering wheel that looks like a F1 thing. It's like, but Elon, what about cornering in an urban environment? Like, no, that's actually figured out.
yeah, it's interesting to like. There's some poetry here about Trump won the presidency in 2016 in large part because he had spent over a decade branding himself as the rich guy on television, and he personified just like American capitalism as
he's the "you're fired"
image.
Guy.
He's the "you're fired" guy. But then you see the reality of what it really means to be one of the richest people on the planet, and you watch that guy with no riz jumping up and down and rambling on and on. Perhaps he's in a K-hole, perhaps he's not. And you're just like, okay, so this all was a myth. Like, the crack, we're doing this Trump thing for the third time around. He's already been president. The shine is definitely off the golden toilet. And then you have a guy coming in like this and just, I don't know. Apparently, he's also a part of his pack is leading ground operations for Donald Trump in important swing states, as is Turning Points USA. It's so it's such a carbon copy of a carbon copy of something that once appealed to people, and you kind of just see in real time the whole house of cards falling upon itself.
It's amazing that these guys can't even speak sort of forcefully. Like, what are you doing in boardrooms? You're not getting.
No, he's mumbling or like sleeping and then getting told he's a genius by all the handlers around him.
And it's the same as Peter Thiel. Remember Peter Thiel at Oxford or Cambridge or wherever? And if people haven't watched X-Files, search up Tooms, Tooms, X-Files. Because all these guys, they're like that kind of creep.
Right.
Like, you almost want to like take a shower after hearing them complete a sentence.
And it also just break the idea that people like this, Elizabeth Holmes, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, who are just, if you were to meet them at a bar, say, oh, this is a creepy human being. The fact that they were able to mislead so many wealthy people into investing into their projects just goes to show, wow, a lot of this is just BS. Yeah. And they were able to talk like they were socially awkward, and that was enough to convince those folks that these guys were building something important or innovative.
It makes you feel really confident that the economic priorities of the entire world are dictated by investors and their discernment. It's great. It's a good position to be in.
Anyway, don't trust any of Elon's cars going forward as well. Like I just saw Andrew from DC points, and did you see that Geico announced that it would not be covering cyber trucks? I mean, good on Geico, because those things are monstrosities.
I'm seeing too many of them. For a while, I thought like maybe we're gonna dodge ever seeing one of these things, and I've seen like 4 or 5 of them in
Me too.
Brooklyn, Manhattan.
And I've seen like athletes, like rookie NFL players who don't make a ton of money with cyber trucks, and I'm like, I think they're giving them away.
I think they're comped. Yep.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to get into our two phenomenal conversations on the anniversary of October 7th in just a sec. But first, a word from our sponsors, Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth, I use their bedding every night. Keeps me cool, but it also keeps you warm in the winter. It's temperature regulating, and it was just a godsend for me as somebody who has like a hard time sleeping, especially when it's too hot. Cozy Earth in the summer in New York City, I don't know what I would have done without Cozy Earth. Thank you to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode. Unlock an exclusive discount of up to 40% off by using code MajorityReport at CozyEarth.com/MajorityReport. Feel the difference with Cozy Earth's best-selling bamboo sheet set made from 100% viscose from bamboo. Cozy Earth's breathable sheets are uniquely soft and only get softer with every wash. All Cozy Earth bedding products come with a 100-night sleep trial. If you're not completely in love, return it for a full refund. Cozy Earth's goal is to help you create a sanctuary within your home, a refuge from the outside world's demands. We understand the significance of finding comfort and tranquility amid our hectic lives. Your 5 to 9 should consist of relaxation, rejuvenation, unwinding, and embracing a sense of calm. With Cozy Earth, you can transform your space into an elevated haven where serenity and renewal intertwine effortlessly. Cozy Earth sheets are so breathable that you'll sleep several degrees cooler. They're made of durable weave fabric that won't pill, guaranteed for 10 years. The ultimate ingredient for luxurious sleep is softness. Cozy Earth uses the best fabrics and textiles, and that enhances that experience. Cozy Earth prides itself on its responsible production of its products, and Cozy Earth bedding's products have a 10-year warranty. That's how much Cozy Earth believes in them. Your peace of mind matters. Make the smart choice this election season. Embrace the comfort of Cozy Earth and feel the difference. Go to CozyEarth.com/MajorityReport and use code MajorityReport for an exclusive discount of up to 40% off. That's CozyEarth.com/MajorityReport. If you get a post-purchase survey, just say that you heard about Cozy Earth from the Majority Report with Sam Seder podcast. Thank you to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this program and also my sleep. And lastly, one of our favorite sponsors, Sunset Lake Seder. They're having a sale starting last week through tomorrow, October 8th, by the end of the day, Eastern Time. All Sunset Lake Seder edibles will be 35% off if you use the coupon code October24 at checkout. Summer is officially over, folks. That means we're in for cooler weather, more family gatherings, and a stressful election season. But we have good news here. Our friends at Sunset Lake Seder can help you navigate some of that stress right now. If you head over to the website and use the coupon code October24, no spaces, you can save 35% off on infused edible products. They've got coffee, soft gels, fudge, hemp-derived THC gummies that you can pop into your mouth if you want to catch a little bit of a buzz. I use the Sunset Lake Seder sleep gummies or sleep tinctures basically every night. It helps me get to sleep. I'll use it sometimes if I'm having a stressful day. One of the Sam and I have been popping those soft gels that I see over there on his desk. Those are incredibly helpful. Visit sunsetlakeseder.com. Use code October24 to save 35% off on edibles. We know that Sunset Lake is a company that you can feel good about purchasing their products from. They use regenerative farming practices. They pay their employees living wage. They have donated to things like strike funds and refugee resettlement organizations, partnered with this program many times before on that front. So if you want some good quality Seder, go to sunsetlakeseder.com and use the code October24 to save 35% off on all edibles. This sale ends October 8th tomorrow. See their website and sale for sale terms and conditions. All right, folks. When we come back, we will be playing the conversation that Sam and I had with Professor Ilan Pappe.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It is a real pleasure to welcome back to the program Ilan Pappe, professor of history at the University of Exeter in the UK and director of the European Center for Palestine Studies, author of one of many books, Lobbying for Zionism on Both Sides of the Atlantic, which came out this past June, I believe. Professor, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. So it's a great pleasure to be with you again.
We last spoke with you. I don't know if you recall. I imagine this has been a rather busy year for you this year in particular. But we last spoke with you almost a year ago on October 23rd of 2023. And by then, it was already clear this was going to be a horrific assault on Gaza. I'm curious. I just want to start with this, and then I want to go into some of the things that I learned through your book, and then bring us back to more present day and a piece you just wrote in the Palestine Chronicle. But to the extent that you can recall, what you were imagining or what you were anticipating, more or less this time, late October of 2023, how has your perspective or your sense of what's happening changed, if it has at all? Has there been anything that has you found particularly shocking over the course of the past year, in terms of the actions the various the entities have played?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've asked it myself several times in this last year. I think in one sentence, I can say that many think that I could detect as potentially happening or as processes that have potential to mature and change dramatically the reality in Israel and Palestine are not potential anymore. They're just happening. In a way, it's like imagining a very slow process, and suddenly you realize it's not slow at all. It's like moving fast beyond your comprehension. And I will give two examples. I mean, I was aware before the 7th of October of how right-wing the Israeli society became. And I was aware of the messianic nature of the Israeli government that was elected in November 2022. And I was aware of their plans and their ideas. But somehow I believe that this is still a process in the making, that we have to wait and see whether our worst case scenarios are unfolding or not. And I think what happened the last year, that the worst case scenarios in every respect that is related to the ideology of the government and the racist attitudes of the Israeli Jewish society, the majority of the members of that society, the worst case scenario has been unfolding, has happened, occurring much quicker than any of us, I think, ever thought. So that's one process where I was really did not expect it to go that fast and that dramatically to change the reality and just erasing any hope for an alternative thinking or any hope for an alternative political system. The second process is the process of disintegration of Israel, the collapse of the Zionist project. I before the 7th of October, I thought that in a generation's time, and this is 25 years, and this is a more kind of soft prediction, that you already see processes, but you are very careful in stating that you know exactly how they will mature, because you're not sure how events will evolve 10 years or 15 years from now. So my whole attitude, not only mine, I know of many colleagues of mine, was very careful in kind of giving some more precise prediction of where Israel is going, where the Zionist project is going. I think the last year, and I think I described it in certain places, was like a huge earthquake that exposed extensive cracks in the building that is called the State of Israel. So if you want, if I may use this metaphor, I knew there were cracks in the building. I didn't know how extensive they are and how precarious this building is. And therefore, I don't think this is anymore a story of the far future, kind of a distant future from now, that I, especially as an academic, not just an activist, have to be very careful in choosing my words of what can happen. I'm just seeing it in front of my eyes. I see these cracks in the building, and I'm talking about metaphorically, but what I mean here is a failed state. We have failed states around us in Israel. We have one in Syria. We have not far away from us in Libya. So there are real models I can look at, contemporary models of disintegrating states, and I recognize the same symptoms now in Israel. It's like Israel is now fully integrated into the Eastern Mediterranean, into the Arab world in that respect.
That's fascinating. I think we definitely want to circle back around to that notion of where Israel is, in terms of its state as a state, and where it's going to its future. Let me just ask you, in terms of the first observation, I guess the despair, maybe, perhaps, I don't know, I don't want to put words into your mouth, in terms of like the realization or the watching the progression of the right-wing ideology and just how much it had permeated. I mean, people forget that in 2023, the first half of 2023 was a series of major protests that were a function about Netanyahu's attempt to change the relationship between the judiciary and civil society. One of the questions in people that we had interviewed at the time was, would there be a connection between what was being brought home essentially from the West Bank and perhaps Gaza, this authoritarianism that was attempted to sort of like be integrated into a Jewish Israeli society? Would the protesters make this connection of like, this is the situation that has existed for the Palestinians? And there was, the assessment was, it doesn't seem like it's happening. This goes the complete, other direction. What was this a natural progression from Zionism, or do you believe that this was a potential? And if it was just a potential from the essence of Zionism, what things went wrong from the perspective of those of us who see Israel as becoming increasingly authoritarian and fascist in some respects?
Well, to be honest, the whole project that began to be implemented in the late 19th century of imposing a European Jewish state on the Arab world and trying to build it in the midst of the Arab world, imposing it on millions of people against their will, people who already began their own process of modernization and adopting a national identity, and like all the other people in their surrounding, dreaming of their own independence and freedom after 400 years of Ottoman rule. This project could not have succeeded. And the only reason it lasted so long, as we know, is not merely because of this, the capacity of the settlers to build a high-tech state and build also a very formidable military capacity, but mainly because external power sustained it for their own interests. And it was definitely a logical, I'm afraid, it's a logical development of any settler colonial project like the Zionist project. The DNA of such a project is to continue and try and get as much of the new land that which they arrived in the late 19th century and have in it as few of the indigenous native people who lived there. Now, in certain historical moments, as happened in the United States 200 years before, or 100 years before, you could genocide the native people and remove them in a very significant way. And although they're still there and they're still struggling, you can build a settler state that more or less survives and exists. But if you do it the way the Zionists did in that particular historical timing, the late 19th century, when decolonization already starts and people are already thinking about decolonization, and when the Palestinians are at a very high level already of national identity, or adopting a collective national identity and ready to begin an anti-colonialist struggle, there was no hope that this would ever that the Zionist project would ever succeed unless, and this will come to the second part of your question, unless there would be a moment, or there would be moments in the history of the Zionist project and later of the State of Israel, in which its leaders, its political leaders, or its political and cultural and economic elite would understand something that at least some of the white in South Africa understood in the very last minutes before the apartheid regime collapsed over there, namely that you have totally to differently reimagine the relationship between yourself, the community of settlers, and even the settler state that you have built, and the indigenous native people, the Palestinians, but not only the native Palestinians, but the Arab world into which you settled, in which part of which you have colonized. Very much like the whites in South Africa realizing not only that apartheid is not working, but after 400 years they were reminded that they're actually in Africa. And Israel still thinks that it's in Europe. It still does not recognize its geographical, cultural location, its historical location. So this was from the very beginning, because this is the DNA of any settler movement from Europe that covets someone else's homeland. So in many ways, this is an inevitable consequence. But as an historian, I could see the moments where things could have changed, or at least they will create some conditions for change. But this particular settler colonial project did not have enough intellectual, political, cultural forces in it to dare and offer an alternative. And there was no one from its allies, and this project had, strong allies from the very beginning to our time. It's the alliance that decided that the settler colonial Jewish state in Palestine is an asset, is something that should be supported. This alliance is incredible. I don't remember in history such alliance. I mean, it includes the mega powers of the world, the mega multinational corporation, the Christian world, the religious Christian hierarchy, not to mention, of course, Jewish communities around the world, military industries, security industries, high-tech industries. I mean, it's a powerful alliance. It doesn't create an incentive, actually, to try an alternative. I'm also blaming that part. Of course, the responsibility lies on the Israelis themselves to understand that they are now torturing the Palestinians and abusing their rights and oppressing them for more than 76 years, if not longer. But in order to make them at least realize that there is a need for an alternative, even if they themselves don't understand that there's a need for an alternative, you need international pressure. And as you probably noticed, even the regional pressure that was, at least at the time of Jamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, and some solidarity with the Palestinian Liberation Movement in places like Kuwait, Syria, in Lebanon, even that has changed. And there are important regional powers are part of that alliance.
That dynamic of enabling that you're talking about in terms of like these international players, and Israel never getting to sort of like a rock and a hard place where they might, as a society, might have chosen these potential alternative paths at various points in its history, is in some respects, what you've written about in lobbying for Zionism on both sides of the Atlantic. And let's start with, if we could, I have just a couple of questions about this, just so that people get a sense of the context. I had always known that Balfour, of the Balfour Declaration of 1918, was an anti-Semite, and that the inspiration for, or at least in part, for a colony, a Zionist colony or Jewish colony in Palestine was, that way they don't come here. Speaking of like Russian emigres and whatnot. I mean, it's like, we had something similar with abolitionists. There was a certain crew of abolitionists in our history who were like, we shouldn't have slaves, but we should also ship them back to Africa. What I did not realize, though, which is very similar to the dynamic that we have in this country today, was the role of Christian evangelicals, that Balfour was a Christian evangelical. Can you extrapolate on that? Because CUFI, we will talk about AIPAC in a moment, but CUFI in this country is a big evangelical Christian organization that is specifically a Christian Zionist organization that may have even more resources than, in fact, AIPAC does in many respects. If you could just sort of like outline that history and the historic parallels.
Yes, definitely. It starts with the fact that is usually overlooked, that actually Zionism began as an evangelical Christian idea before it became a Jewish idea. Of course, not every evangelical stream subscribed to it, but a very important stream within evangelical Christianity, even before one Jewish intellectual or activist thought about Zionism, was already in existence in the late 18th century and the very beginning of the 19th century. This was the idea that what they called the restoration of the Jews to Palestine, or the return of the Jews of Palestine, is part of a divine scheme that would precipitate the second coming of the Messiah, the resurrection of the dead, and the beginning of the end of time. The difference between them and other Christians who also believed in such an apocalyptic, scenario was that they thought that actually you could accelerate the process by encouraging the Jews to go to Palestine, that would kind of activate that kind of process that eventually would bring back Jesus Christ. And of course, one of the reasons that they supported it was also anti-Semitism. So as I say in the book, I mean, these were people who wanted to get rid of the Jews in their vicinity and instead get back the only Jew they wanted, Jesus Christ, kind of a double bill for evangelical Christians. And they held very important positions in government, in industry, in culture, and were very effective as preachers, as people with connection to aristocracy in Britain or the political elite in the United States. I think they became particularly powerful when they began to add to the religious explanation or motivation for the need to settle the Jews in Palestine, also secular explanations. When, especially they began in Britain, when these evangelical Christians realized that they might have allies were not necessarily that religious, but would have liked to expand the British Empire over areas that at that time was still part of the Ottoman Empire, they became even more powerful. So some of the people who joined these evangelical Christians in pushing the idea of settling the Jews in Palestine were imperialists rather than evangelical Christians, to put it that way. But that created that kind of alliance. And the final leg, if you want, in this triangle that was the basis for Zionism even before Zionism became a known feature among the Jews of Eastern and Central Europe, were the Anglo-Jewish aristocrats. Because the Anglo-Jewish aristocrats were aware that for economic reasons and cultural reasons and discriminatory policies, especially the Jews in Russia, were beginning to come in large numbers to Britain. And some of them came even with some revolutionary ideas a bit later on. And they also wanted to stop the flow of Jews into Britain. Later, their counterparts, who were not aristocrats but were already established American Jews, didn't want that flow to come to the United States. And they added their voice, or they strengthened that alliance that was basically anti-Semitic, even when we're talking about these Anglo-aristocratic Jews. So diverting them to Palestine, first and foremost, for the non-evangelical Christians, was a way of stopping poor Jews coming into the West. For the evangelical Christians, it was, of course, an indication that the end of time is near, and this is the first station in a long road up to salvation and redemption.
I'm reminded of Manifest Destiny when you speak about colonization with these religious justifications behind it and how those things get tangled together. And we spoke, actually, I did yesterday, to Adam Hania, who wrote Crude Capitalism. I believe he's also at University of Exeter as well. Right. And he speaks about just basically the geopolitical importance of the Middle East, and also of how oil played into the explosive growth of capitalism, particularly in the 20th century. You know, I'm curious about your analysis of the Suez Canal and its placement right next to Israel, and how that was essential to also the capitalists' desire to settle Palestine and make it a Western colony.
In my analysis, the fact that there was the Suez Canal, and it became a British interest to control it because of the need to have easy connection to Britain's colonies in Southeast Asia, that particular argument that you need to have Palestine as a British colony was developed on the eve of the First World War. I don't think before that. Actually, until the 1914, until the outbreak of the First World War, from a strategic point of view, Britain was not interested in Palestine. It was interested in Iraq because it also had the ways. I mean, you could go through Iraq, through the rivers, to the ocean, in the Suez Canal in Egypt, and roughly when they began to understand there is oil first in Persia, that is Iran, and the Arabian Peninsula, they became also interested in those areas. I think that once it was clear that the Ottomans, or rather the Turkish army, when the fighting began in the Middle East, would use Palestine to attack the British in Egypt, then I think British strategists decided that in order to protect the canal, you need also to occupy Palestine. And that was, as I write in the book, this happened in 1915. It was a very crucial moment because the British Empire had two options. One suggested by Lawrence of Arabia and his friends. He said, yes, you're right. If you want to protect the Suez Canal, you need to control Palestine. So Palestine has to be, Lawrence of Arabia agreed, it has to be part of the British influence or empire. But he said, we need an Arab ruler in Palestine. And he suggested his good friends, the Hashemites, who were his main allies. Those of you who are familiar with the Lawrence of Arabia story that was also made into a Hollywood film, he was connected with the Hashemite family, the family that protected the Mecca and Medina, the holiest places for Islam, and they participated with him with the British in the war efforts against the Turks in the Middle East. And Lawrence of Arabia and his associates believed that they should have been rewarded for that part by allowing them to create kingdoms all over the Eastern Mediterranean that used to be Ottoman and now becomes part of European colonial empires. The British hoped that most of it would be under British rule. And Palestine was included in that promise. So that was one option. And I write in the book that the lobby understood precisely that this was a rare moment in history. If they are not going to convince the British in 1915 that it's not enough to have a British Palestine in order to protect the canal, you need a Jewish British Palestine or a Jewish Palestine to protect that particular British interest and other interests, British interest in the area. And they succeeded in doing it. The first success of the Zionist lobby, even before the Balfour Declaration, is to make sure that the British plans to occupy Palestine and take it away from the Ottomans after 400 years of Ottoman rule will be connected to the idea of creating a Jewish state. And for that, they needed all these alliance I talked with Sam about. They needed all these people, the Anglo-Jewish aristocrats, the evangelical Christians, the anti-Semitic Christian, British and American, and everyone in the British sphere who, for one reason or another, liked the idea of a Jewish state and preferred it to the idea of an Arab state in Palestine. So I think the Suez Canal was a British interest, but that doesn't explain support for Zionism. They could have had a pro-British Arab Palestine protecting the Suez Canal. The greatest success of the Zionist lobby is to say, to insert something which is not a strategic argument at all, or an economic argument. It's a religious argument. It's a religious argument in a secular empire. And they succeed in doing it, I think, mainly because it was also answering anti-Semitic phobia and the fact that probably Europe was not that secular yet. Maybe it isn't even as we speak that secular as we think.
Was part of that also a function? Because I'm fascinated by the aristocratic, the Jewish aristocratic elite in Britain, and it's I don't think it's hard for to imagine that established elite there don't want Russian Jewish peasants to be coming in and either from their perspective, like, I don't know, tainting the waters, as it were, in their experience in Britain. And I wonder too, though, whether, for some it was religious, but I wonder for others if these aristocratic Jewish elite don't go to the British and say, the value added by having a Jewish Palestine as opposed to a Hashemite one is that, we can talk to each other in a way that we're used to, that type of thing. And if we have a Jewish Palestine, I have a network around the entire world where we have traded because of the way that Jews have been singled out in various societies over time, and this and that. We have a network. We can integrate this into our network. There's a value add there that is beyond the Hashemite kingdom, because we're a little bit more eye to eye as much as we are alien amongst the British. At what juncture, when we talk about the lobby, and I think it's going to become, it becomes more explicit, obviously, as we go through time, what constitutes it. But at what point does the lobby develop we have this, long-standing idea of Zionism from evangelical Christians because they want to bring about the second coming. Herzl comes on the scene in the mid to late 1800s with an idea, not for the same reason, obviously, but at what point does it become a lobby for a Jewish state in Palestine, as opposed to a lobby or an intellectual movement about the idea of a Jewish state?
I think the moment that the Zionist leadership gave up the idea of looking for alternative destination. As you know, the last destination that even Theodor Herzl, the founder and leader of the movement, was willing to consider was Uganda in Africa as alternative to Palestine. The moment his ideas are defeated by his colleagues in the leadership of the Zionist movement, which is around 1903, in that moment, the Zionist lobby is totally focused on creating a Jewish state in Palestine and doesn't consider any other alternatives. And of course, after Herzl's death in 1904, this becomes even more clear. And so all the efforts, I would say, between 1905 to 1917, until the Balfour Declaration, and I'm not underestimating how difficult it was for them, in a way, was to persuade the British government, as I said before, you don't only need a British Palestine, you need a Jewish Palestine. And it was not easy to convince everyone. There were a lot of Anglo-Jews who didn't like the idea. They were worried that they would be accused of dual loyalty. There were even some people who already knew enough about Palestine to understand that this is not an empty land, that there's an unjust side to this project, and all these more Arabophile, pro-Arab kind of personalities, like I mentioned already, Lawrence of Arabia. But they succeeded, and they succeeded by using methods, as I show in the book, that would be familiar to those readers who are familiar with AIPAC. Chasing politicians wherever they go, publishing in the printed press, having huge assemblies. They worked very hard to make sure that this is happening. And the fact that someone like the Rothschild family, again, I think didn't want to see all these poor Jews coming to Europe.
Right.
Invested a lot of money in the Suez Canal themselves, began to invest money in Palestine, and beginning to see some dividends for the economic investment in Palestine. They could be the ones who, by the way, as you mentioned before, would tell the British government, and we are Jews and they are Jews, so you can rely on us.
Yep.
So they had these magnates, these Jewish bankers and magnates also on their side. So economically and politically and religiously, they could put a very good case that it has to be in Palestine, even if strategically, not to mention morally, this was not a valid option.
Let's talk about the evolution of these lobbying tactics. I found the account of William Fulbright in your book to be fascinating, both for two reasons. One, we had just in this past electoral cycle in the United States, a similar dynamic with progressive members of the Squad, Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush in particular, but there's been others who were just completely drowned out by AIPAC money. Although the dynamic, they were already sort of wounded in some way. And that is one of the things that you make the point about AIPAC, is that very often what they're doing is trying to exhibit and project power rather than actually using power to change things, right? I mean, it's almost like there's almost like a bigger shadow cast by their actions because they're strategic in that. But tell us the story of William Fulbright. I also find it fascinating because Fulbright was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee until 1974, when he resigns because he's lost his primary. Within a year, Joe Biden, a freshman senator, is on that committee. And he seems to have learned, I mean, this is completely speculation, and I don't know. I want to take your opinion. Whether this guy learns like, oh boy, I just saw William Fulbright get taken out. And we should say that Fulbright goes on in April of 74, I think it was, on to Face the Nation and says the Senate is controlled by Israel.
That's right.
Tell us the story of William Fulbright, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, I will start from the end. That you're absolutely right. I think what Biden sees explains why in October 2023 he said, "I'm a Zionist president." I think there's a connection there between this and what happened. But let's start with Fulbright. Fulbright was very interested in the interference of foreign countries in American domestic politics, and he began to look who is registered as a foreign agent in the United States. Because if you are registered as a foreign agent, there are a lot of limitations about what you can do, and you're also under control. Your actions could be kind of monitored and supervised. To his great surprise, a lobby for Israel was not registered as a foreign agent. So he began to look more deeply into what AIPAC is doing. And the one thing that really caught his eyes, which is really the worst kind of violation of the American regulations and law, was that AIPAC was recruiting money in the United States to lobby for Israel, which was totally against the American law. And how did they do it? They were recruiting money allegedly for helping the poor people in Israel. So the money went supposedly to the impoverished parts of Israel. But some of it returned to AIPAC to fund its actions. And he exposed it. It wasn't difficult, by the way, to expose it. AIPAC was so self-confident that nothing was done that clandestinely. That also, by the way, surprised him, how in the open it was. And he wanted an open session of his committee. He wanted really the public to understand that this is a grave violation of American regulations and law and should be stopped. He was also convinced that it doesn't serve American interests to be so one-sidedly with Israel. He was sure it undermines American interests elsewhere in the Arab world. But the lobby was strong enough, first of all, to make sure that the meeting would not be open to the public. Secondly, that the report that he wrote would not be published. So he leaked it to the Newsweek, to the magazine Newsweek. And then he became enemy number one for the lobby. And the lobby started chasing him from 1964 until they succeeded 10 years later to really kill his political careers by funding with huge amount of money whoever stood against him for a renomination. They also succeeded in failing his nomination as a foreign secretary, as a Secretary of State, which he really wanted. And I think you're absolutely right. When Biden comes to that, this is not a theory. When Biden comes to that committee, as I say in the book, a new stage begins in the power of AIPAC. Two things are happening. They suddenly realize that most of what they have done is already in place. Namely, that most young American politicians, by inertia, without even being pressured, would know exactly what to say and how to vote when it comes to Israel. That they really don't need to work that hard. That people got the message and it is working by itself. And secondly, that when there was any deviation, which didn't even endanger Israel's interests, wasn't even in Israel's interest, they would use all the might and the force to show that they are the most powerful lobby on Capitol Hill. It was really power for the sake of power and deterrence, and it was behaving like a mafia in that respect, where you sometimes have to show your strengths, not necessarily because the strength is needed to solve the problem, but because you may feel that people might need a reminder how powerful you are. And there are many occasions like this in the history of AIPAC and its functioning on Capitol Hill.
It sounds like Israel's military doctrine. Go on.
But it also describes to a T deploying tens of millions of dollars to take out Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, because there is no way that Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, as members of already an anemic squad, are going to change the foreign policy of the United States in regards to Israel. But they made for, and the interesting thing is that the question of Israel barely came up in these races, at least in the context of like these of their districts. Bowman lost as much because he voted against the IRA because he wanted more of Biden's actual bill. But the bottom line being, like, these are trophies that AIPAC can basically put on their wall, big enough so that people, and I think you even have a story about, they would keep the doors open in their offices as a way of when they were dressing people down, as a way of exhibiting, like, you don't want to be what we did to that person.
Absolutely. And there are more absurd examples. I mean, there is a kind of realization in AIPAC that they are not gaining enough support in civil society. Yes, Capitol Hill is under occupation, so to speak. There's no problem with that. But there are new trends in American civil society, anti-Israeli trends in their eyes, pro-Palestinian. So they use the same idea of massive force in order to kill in its bud any development that they think might create a pro-Palestinian or anti-Israeli local movement. And I give few examples how very small initiatives in the American civil society, especially after the first Intifada, definitely after the second Intifada, and after the siege of Gaza began in 2007, it doesn't matter whichever period you take, they would use massive force in a small village, in a small town, in a small union, in a church, in a small campus, just to make sure that they are in control. Now, of course, the floodgates opened last year, and they don't know exactly how to deal with that. I mean, they think that they dealt with this with bringing all these university leaders to the Senate and using the police against the student movements on the campuses. But looking at it more objectively, as I do outside from the United States, they remind me of this Dutch boy that tries to, well, he succeeded in the story of putting his finger in his dam and saved Holland, if you remember, because he put his finger in the hole in the dam. I don't think that they have enough fingers to the kind of holes that are now in that dam that is called immunity for Israel in the United States.
Sorry.
Yes, Emma, please go on.
Well, just to circle back to the metaphor that you used earlier on about cracks in Israel that you're observing. I read your piece in Sidecar in June, The Collapse of Zionism, and you mentioned this at the outset about how you feel that this could be the end or the beginning of the end of the Zionist project, but that it's going to be a very, very long, bloody, horrible time in that death. Do you still feel that way as you felt in June, given Israel's attempts to engage in a wider war and bombing multiple countries in the Middle East, and Biden seemingly not capitulating to any sense and giving the keys over to Netanyahu in ways that I don't know if we could have anticipated the intensity of his support, even knowing what we know about him, back when we last had a conversation in October.
Mm-hmm. I changed something in my analysis, given what I've seen in the last year. I'm still convinced we are witnessing the beginning of the end. And I still think it's a long and dangerous process of collapse and disintegration. However, I am convinced that there are potential processes, I call them mini revolutions, that can still occur that would do two things. One, will shorten the period, and or secondly, would make it less violent. And I'll give 2 or 3 examples. I think the redefinition of Judaism as religion, as a cultural identity, the kind of things we are beginning to hear from Jewish intellectuals in the United States that are manifested in the way young Jews are now behaving on the streets themselves and on the campuses. The changes in the Eastern Mediterranean as a whole, kind of new thinking about in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Arab world, about the colonial structure of the nation state that was imposed on them after the First World War, the international condemnation of Israel, all these and many others are connected to the way we understand politics, to my mind. I think there is an attempt, probably started in 2008, maybe before, there is an attempt by the civil society to rethink about the essence of politics, something the left used to do but failed in doing. To rethink the essence of politics and has to change the very way politics is being done, not just locally in Israel or locally in the United States. I think it's a global phenomenon. And it's very difficult, of course, because the political elites always have a lot of power to make sure that nobody topples them and nobody changes the name of the game. But there are very powerful forces all over the civil societies on a global level that are they have, if I put it in simple words, they believe that political elites today, with generalizing, but politicians today are far more concerned with their career than with the problems of the society. And that the agenda of the political elites in democracies and non-democracies has very little to do with the real concerns of the people themselves. And Palestine symbolizes this gap for so many people, namely the foreign policy of a given country towards Israel is one very important indication what's wrong with the essence of politics in a certain country, whether it's the policy towards global warming, towards poverty, towards injustice in society, towards military expenditures, towards foreign adventurism. It doesn't matter. When you look at this, you see that Palestine begins to be this symbol for what we would have liked those in power to do in the right moral way. And I'm saying this because I'm optimistic that maybe I don't see it happening in Israel, but I do think it can happen elsewhere. I know we have right-wing, the emergence of very strong right-wing parties in the West, and we have Donald Trump and other populist leaders also in South America. I'm not undermining the importance of these forces, but like every time in history, this also brings out eventually the other side, and we saw it in the French elections. So I do think that I when we talked last, I think I isolated a little bit the process in the future in Israel and Palestine from the regional and the global context. When I look at the regional developments and the global developments, I'm more optimistic. And I think they can have, I'm not predicting, I'm not a prophet, but they can have a positive impact. And they include really the change in the way we do politics. We understand politics. We understand morality in politics. Everything the neo-capitalist, neoliberal system has convinced us are irrelevant features of politics: morality, moral issues, justice. All these, we are being told by political scientists in universities, are ridiculous, naive ideas of young people. No, they are coming back to the core of politics, because the level of politician is so low. They're so mediocre nowadays in so many parts of the world. So I'm optimistic about that. I can see its impact on Palestine.
I mean, I think to that end, in the event that Harris wins in this country, there's going to be, I think, just a real reemergence and explosion of energy to push back on what has been the Biden policy. It remains to be seen if it will be continued by her, but I don't think there's going to be the room post-election that there is prior to election because of the dynamics of this country. And I think, like, at least in the context of the United States, the idea of liberal Zionism is becoming as anachronistic as it sounds, I think, to a lot of people. But with that said, we're talking about the potential for long-range political change. I guess I have two questions. One is, what can be done to mitigate the horrors that we're seeing now, if anything, from the perspective of a political movement, in your opinion? And two, we're seeing, a nascent Palestinian autonomy movement outside of Palestine in a way that I don't feel like I've seen in my lifetime, where there is a more concerted effort and what appears to be, much of it may be lip service, but appears to be a greater understanding that there needs to be Palestinian autonomy. Do you perceive, from a historical perspective, that assuming we do see these changes that you're talking about, that it will result? What kind of, are we talking a two-state solution or a one-state solution? Do you perceive is more likely, with an understanding of the constraints that are involved here?
Yeah, well, to your first point, I think that there are two clocks working here. One is a clock that works on a slower pace. And this is the change in public opinion in the world about Palestine, but not only in public opinion, also in the international legal tribunals. We've seen it in the rulings of the ICJ and the ICC, the language used by the United Nations. So we already have some new allies that change the language about Palestine and are calling for a strong pressure on Israel to stop its genocidal policies in Gaza and the other brutal policies it enacts elsewhere. But there is a quicker pace, and this is the pace on the events on the ground, motivated by this neo-Zionist messianic government, even more than by Netanyahu himself. He's just the captive of this neo-Zionist messianism, that they believe they have an historical moment. In fact, they think it's a narrow historical window. That's why they are pushing for a regional war of everyone against everyone, a bit like these Christian Zionists we talked about before. They really believe that that's a rare historical moment to create what they would call a new Middle East, namely one in which the greater Israel is reestablished with very few Palestinians in it, and everyone else is deterred by that, by that Israel to the extent that it would seek alliances with it rather than challenge its domination. That's the way they think, and they are in powerful positions, not just in the government, but also in the army, in the security service, and so on. So, and
I would argue in our folks like Brett McGurk and the neocons, very similar language in creating a new Middle East.
Absolutely, they have counterparts elsewhere, but they are quickening the pace of destruction. So we need to find a way of narrowing the gap between these two paces. And that it connects to your second question. I think a very crucial role is not for the students in the campuses, which they should continue, and they play a fantastic role. But the crucial role, you're absolutely right, it's for the Palestinian national movement. And nobody has the right really to criticize them that deeply, because what they are going through is so severe that it's not that surprising that you don't have a very well organized, unified, representative body that you could call the new Palestine Liberation Organization. But I think you're right. The younger generation of the Palestinians are working on it more intensively than ever before. We don't see the results as yet because it's a very changing project to recreate the national movement, giving the fragmentation, the disunity, and the problems everybody is familiar with within the Palestinian political system. To my mind, two things have to happen for the Palestinians to become the leading actor in changing the reality, both on the ground and in narrowing the gap I was talking about. One is for the Palestinians and Israel to change their strategy. I mean, that particular group that nobody talks about of 2 million Palestinians still believes it can play in two political fields, the Israeli political field and the Palestinian political field. They are not at all a factor in Israeli politics anymore. Maybe there never was, but they're definitely not now. And I think they should play a far more major role in Palestinian politics. I also have an egotistic wish for them, because these are the only Palestinians who know that not all the Israeli Jews are settlers or soldiers. They have intimate relationship with the Israelis, and they know that there are some good human beings there as well, and that always helps for a less violent decolonization. The second thing that has to happen, because it's a young movement of changing, they have something which is very healthy among young revolutionary movements in this century, a total disdain towards organization, unions, parties, and so on. But you cannot move forward without organization, without a party, without a union. And they will have to overcome their very natural and understandable rejection of organization, because there's hierarchy, there's a potential for corruption there. They will have to overcome that. They will need either to change the PLO from within or build a new organization. And they're trying to do it, but I think they have to triple their efforts and to be a bit more pragmatic and political about it. And that comes to your last point. I know it doesn't matter what I want. I think the vast majority of them can only think about a one-state solution. The chant that the American Congress decided is anti-Semitic, Palestine should be free from the river to the sea, is not an anti-Semitic chant. It's the declaration of the wish to have a democratic state between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean, one that would resemble the way Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived in Palestine before 1948. And I think that's a very credible slogan that actually democracies, especially in the world, should have adopted, rather than pursuing legislations that forbid such chants or slogans and defaming them as anti-Semitic or racist. But I think for that slogan to become a political program, it needs to be adopted by a new organization, either a renewed organization of liberation or a new organization of liberation.
And framing it in the U.S. context, I think we're seeing some liberal writers like Ta-Nehisi Coates speak about it in terms of racial segregation and Jim Crow, which I think is helpful in getting certain liberals in this country on board with one state for all people from the river to the sea. But I guess my final question for you, Professor Pappé, is about Israeli society. The figures about how many dual citizens have fled Israel seem to be a bit unreliable, but it's reflected in the fact that the economy is doing very poorly. Moody's has downgraded them once again. Both people have fled, and also there are many young people who are in the army, and that's affecting the economy as well. But that contraction doesn't seem to be doing anything to pressure the government. Netanyahu has solidified his position in recent weeks, as we've discussed. How can Israeli society change? Because it just seems to be getting more and more radicalized as the violence continues. And even in the hostage protests, I don't see much discussion at all about Palestinians and their rights.
Well, it's a very indoctrinated society. And the Israelis you see today, the vast majority of them are graduates of a certain educational system that is supported by a certain cultural system, language that is used by politicians, the media, the academia, and so on. And therefore, there's very little hope for change. The next generation of graduates from the Israeli school system would adopt similar points of view. And that point of view is that it doesn't matter whether you have a corrupt prime minister or if the army failed on the 7th of October, there are no other options. The only horizon is another 50, 60 years of wars that you always have to win them. There is no option of success. Of course, you have these, as I described before, the new messianic ones who believe that if you use correctly this particular time in history, you can inflict such a defeat on the Arab world that you will have more peaceful years coming. But the vast majority of Israeli Jews do not believe in it. They believe that they are doomed to live the way they lived in the last year, which is incredible, pathological. And it's all over the place. Not surprisingly, if you don't feel like I do, that there is a credible alternative to that reality, and there's another way of living, you leave. What else can you do? And those who don't leave either cannot do it, because it's not that easy to leave, or they somehow believe that there's no other options there are no other alternative ways of living anywhere. This is the way, this is the way you have to live. And probably they become a bit more religious and I don't know, maybe imagine a better life in the afterlife, or believe that God somehow would solve the economic problem, even if the Minister of Finance cannot do that. Yes, it's a traumatic. It's a society in trauma. Is a society that is led by people with no horizon for any different kind of future, and there are no alternative political forces that offer a different horizon. So, what you see now, you will get next year and the year after, and it doesn't matter whether Netanyahu would be elected or not elected in 2026. As you rightly say, he seems to be like the phoenix. Everybody buried him politically, but there he is now again, the most popular politician in Israel, and he might remain like this in 2026. The more right-wing the Israeli political system will be or remain or become, the quicker the collapse of Israel will happen. And because I don't see any alternative to that kind of politics in Israel, I stand by my analysis that we are seeing the beginning of the collapse here, which, as I say, can be a horrific scenario. I'm an Israeli Jew myself. I don't want destruction, neither to me, to my family, and to the people I love and care. But it could also be a moment of hope for building a free Palestine for all, from the river to the sea. The Palestinians definitely deserve to live in such a state which is free from oppression, colonization, apartheid. I also believe Zionism is very bad for the Jews wherever they are, and also for the Jews in Israel. A de-Zionized, decolonized, post-Israel Palestine would be a win-win, to my mind, to everyone. You just have to find a way of getting there quickly and with as less violent as possible, and believe that it's possible. Because otherwise, because it's such a challenging imagination, you need such an imagination and the kind of optimistic overdoses as I have to believe that this is possible, which hopefully will activate the right actions towards such a goal.
Ilan Pappe, professor of history at the University of Exeter and director of European Center for Palestine Studies. Most recently, lobbying for Zionism on both sides of the Atlantic. In fact, I'm not even sure that's the most recent book of yours.
That's true.
But certainly fascinating read. Professor, thank you again. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Thank you, Emma and Sam. Thank you.
Thank you. We are back, and we are joined now by Rakan Abed El Rahman, correspondent in the Gaza Strip for the National News. Rakan, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me for this interview. Thank you.
I'm so glad to be able to speak with you. I know, of course, conditions on the ground are horrendous. Can you give us an update on what the Gaza Strip has looked like over the past few weeks? Because as in the West, we're looking at turning our attention to, at least the press is, the strikes in Lebanon, which have been horrible. But I know that the strikes in the Gaza Strip have been intensifying over the past few weeks.
Yes, we're very intensified in the last weeks. The Israeli airstrikes continue. It did not stop. Just yesterday, Israeli airstrike targeted a mosque in central Gaza Strip where at least 20 people were killed. Among them, there are children. Also, yesterday, the Israeli airstrike targeted a school in Deir el-Balah, central Gaza Strip. This school is a shelter for displaced people who displaced from northern Gaza to the southern Gaza and took shelter in this school. However, this school were targeted and a lot of casualties were inside this school. So over the last year, the situation in Gaza Strip was horrific, very difficult on the people of Gaza Strip. We are now here, the death toll of civilian casualties is more than 42,000 people, civilians, most of them civilians, okay, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza. We are talking about, among them, there are 15,000 children who were killed during the last year. So it is a tough year on the people of the Gaza Strip. They did not expect that this war will last this long. It was a very difficult year on the Palestinians or Gazans here in the Gaza Strip.
Of course. And when you speak about the children, can you speak about the psychological impact of the bombing on children? Because we see the death tolls, but of course, there's the horror that you and others have had to endure of not knowing when the next bomb is going to go off, etc.
Yes. The children in Gaza are suffering so much. Okay. Personally, I have 4 children. Okay. From 1 year to 12 years. It was very difficult for them when they hear the sounds of bombs. Okay, they are just terrifying. They don't know what is the sound. What is the sound of this bomb? You know, I met hundreds of children during the last year. They were unable to talk. Probably they always telling me that they are very scared when they hear the sounds of Israeli bombs, and when they saw the people, the killed people lying on in front of them. Okay, so this is really factors that affects their psychologically, really.
And in terms of what you've seen, what are some of the images of the horror in the Gaza Strip that you'd like to get out there? People are seeing bloodshed on a daily basis. What would you want to emphasize in terms of what things really look like on the ground?
Well, on the ground, unfortunately, we don't have the words, the exact words to reflect or to tell what is going here. It's beyond our mind. Okay, when you see hundreds of people and thousands of people being killed in front of your eyes, okay, this is something horrible. Okay, and when you see children without heads, it's a horrible thing. And when you see them under the rubble, and their parents cannot pull them out from the rubble, they just looking at them and crying, because the civil defense here in Gaza Strip, they don't have the proper equipment to save these lives. Okay, so they die under the rubble because the civil defense simply, they don't have the needed equipment, because Gaza have been under siege for over 17 years, which affect all sectors in the Gaza Strip.
And in terms of life before and life after October 7th, over this past year, of course, Gaza has been blockaded and basically been controlled by the Israeli government for many years. So life already had its difficulties, but can you explain what life was like before October 7th and how things have been in comparison, of course, over the past year into this genocide?
Okay, so before the war, we were receiving just 8 hours of electricity. Okay, and we can tell you that we accept this life. We accepted this life to be under. We received just 8 hours of electricity. Okay, there was no clean water until now. We don't have clean water to drink. We suffering to get a clean water to drink. Life before the October 7 was not idle here in the Gaza Strip, because, as I told you, it's been over 17 years under the blockade, and all the sectors in the Gaza Strip have been affected. We are talking about the health sector. It was totally collapsed before 7 October. People were dying because there was no enough medicine in the hospitals. Patients who need to travel abroad, Gaza Strip, were not able to travel because the closure of Rafah crossing and Rafah crossing that connect Gaza with Egypt, and the closure of airs crossing that connect Gaza with Israel. So these patients were struggling to get out of the Gaza Strip, to get a proper treatment that is not available in Gaza. we are talking also about the cancer patients. They were they were struggling and dying here in Gaza because there was no medicines for them here in the Gaza Strip, and they were struggling to get out from the Gaza Strip. The life was not idle, okay? People here in the Gaza Strip were living under the poverty line. We are talking about 55% of people in the Gaza Strip were living under the poverty line in the Gaza Strip. Parents were struggling to bring food for their children because there is no work in Gaza Strip, and youth were thinking of immigration to immigrate from the Gaza Strip because of the high rate of unemployment. We are talking about 85% the rate of unemployment among the youth in the Gaza Strip. But despite all of these things, okay, somehow there was. I'm not telling you that some kind of safety, but at least there was no constant airstrikes like what happened in the last year. Okay, me personally, I witnessed wars. I witnessed war 2008, 2012, 2014, 2021. All these 4 wars on the Gaza Strip cannot be like a comparison to what we witnessed in this war in 2023 after the 7th of October. It was a deadly war. The airstrikes did not stop. Okay, at any moment, the sounds of Israeli drones just passing above our heads 24 hours a week. So, and this gives you the feeling of terror, the feeling that you might be targeted at any moment and being killed, just simply like that.
And that is, I think, a fear for everybody. It's, of course, but for journalists and other media workers like yourself in the Gaza Strip, what has the last year been like? Over 100 journalists and media workers that we know of have been killed in the Gaza Strip. Can you speak about your colleagues and the other members of the press who have been targeted by Israel?
Yes, it's very sad that until now, more than 170 Palestinian journalists from Gaza, my fellow journalists, have been killed in this war just because they are covering what is going on here in Gaza. They are just telling the truth. They are just telling the world what is happening here in the Gaza Strip, okay? Because Israel prevents the international journalists and foreign journalists to come and enter into Gaza. So the Gazan journalists hold this responsibility, okay, to convey and telling what is going on here in the Gaza Strip, the killing among the Palestinian people here in the Gaza Strip. Okay, so it's, you know, when I go to work, I am always under pressure, okay, because my fellow journalists were killed just because they did their work, because they were in the field covering what is going on here, covering the airstrikes, covering the casualties of these Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. So it's really horrible when you know that when you go to work and to film what is going on here in the Gaza Strip, that at any moment that you might be targeted and be killed. Okay, so I'm always under pressure how to how to balance this. Okay, how to balance this to be. I am a father of 4 children, and I have a responsibility toward my children. So it's a huge pressure on me just to go to film and leaving behind my children. And not me, all the Palestinian journalists here in Gaza Strip, all of them have families. A lot of journalists lost their families, lost their children, lost their parents. Their homes were targeted and destroyed just because they are a journalist telling what is going on here in the Gaza Strip. So it's really very hard for a journalist to work in a place like the Gaza Strip because there is the international law. Israel did not respect the international law to not target the journalists. It killed them. It killed the Palestinian journalists and violated all the international laws against the journalists who should be protected according to international law.
Yes. And what have been the experiences of some of your other journalists and your colleagues in the Gaza Strip that maybe you would want people in the United States or in our audience to know?
I mean, there are journalists who were injured in this war, okay? Who some of them lost their arms, their legs, and their legs got amputated. They are not able to travel outside Gaza to get the proper treatment. Okay, so they are struggling to get the proper treatment. This is what we are willing. Also, some journalists are really terrified from being targeted because just yesterday the Israeli airstrike targeted a tent at Al-Aqsa Hospital, Central Gaza Strip. One of my colleagues was injured. Just a shrapnel of the rocket hit his legs. So they are always under the risk of being targeted at any moment, even if they are in a safe place, as the Israeli army says, or in the humanitarian zone. They are. So they have nowhere. They have no safe place for them. There is no safe place for the journalists. Same as the residents of Gaza here in the Gaza Strip.
And for all of the residents, can you speak about how have people been able to get food? I know that the entire population is facing acute food insecurity. How have people been able to get water, food, if at all? And what are the conditions in terms of how people are able to eat and drink water?
Well, the food in Gaza here is they are suffering from getting food. And even if they get it, the prices are very high. And they cannot afford it, okay? Because they don't have money. They have, the war it's a year now, and they did not work. They don't have work to get the money. And as I told you, the poverty line in Gaza is very high before October 7th, and now after the war, the poverty line has increased, and the people who suffer from poverty increased. So they are not able to get the proper food. They totally depend on the aid that get into from outside Gaza. This is the only way they have. Because if they did not get aid from outside Gaza, they will die from starvation. Okay, people of if we would talk about the starvation, we would like to mention the people in the northern of Gaza Strip. Residents of northern Gaza Strip suffer from severe starvation, okay, because there is no proper food for them, okay, because Israeli army blocks the road that connect northern Gaza with southern Gaza, and it prevent food to come to northern Gaza. Just a little of trucks that can get into Gaza, into the northern Gaza Strip. So water, if we would like to talk about the water, drinking water, all of them are struggling to get drink water. Imagine that if you want to get drink water, you have to walk 2 or 3 kilometers just to fill a gallon, 20 liters for the one day. And for washing clean water, they receive clean water just maybe one time a week or 2 times a week, and most of these and this water is not enough for them. It's not enough for washing, for bathing, for cleaning. It's not enough at all. They are struggling daily to get the water for washing. So every day and every second is a struggling. They struggle to get food and water.
And in terms of sleep, how are you able to sleep and other people in the Gaza Strip as, of course, the bombs are constant and the drones are constant overhead?
In fact, we cannot describe this, okay? Because I don't know, when you are going just to get rest, to sleep, and suddenly you hear a huge explosions that prevent you from sleeping, okay? I remember in late December, I was at my home. It was around 9 or 10 p.m. and I was just preparing me and my kids to sleep. The Israeli shells started to fall on the area around me. Literally, for 2 hours, these shells did not stop. Okay, so it was a horrific night for me. And this is not a night. All the day we hear the sounds of Israeli airstrikes at night and all the night. So you cannot sleep very well because you feel that maybe this airstrike will come. Maybe you will be the target of this airstrike, and you will be killed, and you will not. I cannot describe the situation for you.
I can't imagine, obviously. And before we let you go, if you could just give us a sense of the state of the medical situation. We talked about it a little bit, but I know that doctors and medical workers have been targeted. Here in the United States, we had a letter written to Biden and Kamala Harris where 99 American doctors estimate that and nurses estimate that the death tolls is at least 118,000. And we know that it's hard to get medical supplies and all of that. What's the state of healthcare in the Gaza Strip right now?
Yes, the healthcare system in Gaza is totally collapsed. Okay, injuries who arrive to the hospital and need just a little treatment to live, they cannot get it, and they died because they don't have the needed treatment. But if they get the proper treatment, maybe they have the chance to live. Okay, we are talking about the hospitals in Gaza work 300 above of their capacity. Okay, there is no enough bedroom. There is no intensive care units. Patients just lying on the corridors of the hospitals because there is no, as I told you, beds for them or rooms to get the treatment. Right now, there are just 2 hospitals works or 3 hospitals work in the Gaza Strip. In the southern, we have just Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis city and the European Hospital in Khan Yunis, and we have the Al-Aqsa Hospital in the in Deir al-Balah Central Gaza Strip. So these 3 hospitals serving more than 1 million people, okay? More than 1.5 million people. So it's hard for a collapsed system that already collapsed before October 7th to serve and to provide health service for tens or hundreds of thousands of people that being targeted day by day. So the whole health system in the Gaza is totally collapsed.
Really appreciate your time today, Rakan Abed El Rahman. What would you like? How can our audience help, or what would you like them to take away from our conversation?
Well, what I need them to know that to look for the truth about what is happening now in the Gaza Strip, and do not just listening to for the Western media that Israel is all the people in the Gaza Strip are Hamas. They are not Hamas. Okay, there are civilians who live here in the Gaza Strip that they are not connected to Hamas. Okay, they are just civilian people, and always Israeli army claims that they are targeted Hamas centers or something like that. No, they are targeting the civilians, the Palestinian civilians who are here in the Gaza Strip and killing children and women just because they are here in their land. They are not part of what I mean. They are not connected to Hamas. Okay, not all the people here in the Gaza Strip belong to Hamas. That's it.
Thanks so much, Rakan, and stay safe.
Thank you so much.
We are back, folks, and we are going to wrap up our longer than normal half. I guess it's like
information half.
Yes, the important, serious half. That's going to be a wrap for that. We'll do a little bit of some fun clips in the fun half in just a second. We won't have time for calls today, but we will take them tomorrow. But we will read your IMs. If you're a member, you can join themajorityreport.com. You can IM the show, and we'll read your IMs on air. For people that were asking at the beginning, yes, Rakan is in Gaza. So we were so lucky that we were able to get him to connect with us via video or connect with us at all. We recorded that interview earlier this morning. So that paired with our conversation with Ilan Pappe, I thought we thought the show was important to give that perspective.
Yeah, and I think we've had a few people on from Gaza, and I mean Palestinian journalists, the sort of what they're going through, and also the gratitude they have toward people like us, at least giving them a platform, is almost like it's heavy. And it's it's an honor to be able to have people like that, and it's horrible to hear them talk about things like the sleep deprivation that being bombed at night causes.
I mean, the trauma for anyone who survives also is just like, that's what we keep trying.
Being tortured.
Yeah, it's a horror show, and we are not putting the brakes on it in any regard. So it's extremely disheartening. But with that said, Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, a couple of things. Cole Stangler on talking about updating, as Ilan Pappe mentioned, France, the speedrunning sellout of a popular front by Emmanuel Macron as he puts a right-winger in a prime minister position. Also, after this, at about 2:45 on the Left Reckoning YouTube channel, go subscribe to that, folks. Alessandro and Naomi, two organizers in Montana, talking about tenant organizing there, because guess what? Just because it's a big wide open state doesn't mean housing is any more affordable there. So check that out. Very inspiring stuff. And also, Bradley, if you can just pull this over, one of the most important publishers in the world right now is having an issue with their payments. Basically, I think one of their distribution, click on the Kickstarter, one of their they're having money issues, basically.
Wow.
And so Verso, you definitely need to go over and help them out. I mean, they've already raised the goal, actually, so maybe it's a little bit redundant.
Well, but I mean,
Yeah.
for so many of the authors that you listen to here on this program are published by Verso. If we're looking for guests, it's the first place I go to.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess the Kickstarter, they've got it well done to all 3,000 backers who get them $250,000 of the 130. But it may be a good time to go look at what they're offering. They probably have sales on, and buy some ebooks at least. It's really nice. They go right to your email, and there's no Jeff Bezos style DRM keeping you from, say, throwing it into your text-to-speech software. So check that out.
And on ESPN today, Bradley and I will be going through Week 5 in the NFL. A few overtime thrillers, the Bengals falling to 1-4, which is extremely unfortunate. The Giants actually won in Seattle, which was a very difficult place to play.
5-0 Minnesota Vikings.
The Minnesota Vikings are undefeated heading into their bye, and the best team in the NFL right now, showing a lot of resiliency. And then we'll also talk about Josh Allen's very curious head injury, how it clearly looked like he was concussed. There were smelling salts seen on the sideline. And what do you know? He cleared concussion protocol to go back in and play that game. There's a lot there. We will be talking more about that, and also the Major League Baseball playoffs, which, as a fair weather Mets fan, now that they have won a series and they're in it with the Phillies and split in Philadelphia, I am back into watching baseball. So I did that all weekend. YouTube.com/ESPN show today. DSA Aaron in Atlanta writes in, it's an honor to be a fan of this program. Thanks for being the truth in media while most of it lies about Palestine. Very much appreciate that. The kind words on that front. All right, guys, we'll see you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
Wow.
sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Twerk. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid. Twerk. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
Had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid. Twerk.
I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, all right. It's not a fun job. Twerk?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka twerk?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered to twerk?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's
twerk?
a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered to twerk?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
Offered to twerk?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing. That's
poker with the boys. Offered to twerk?
That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Twerk? Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Twerk? Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Twerk?
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Poggers.
Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right. Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best.
Violet twerk?
Don't be foolish. And don't fucking tweet at me. And don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people. Love it.
That's where my heart is. So I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh.
Sorry.
She wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.